Greetings to my fellow peace blunderers, it's great to be back making videos, and today I am blowing your mind, I am changing your perception of reality, and I am wasting the precious minutes of your life all at once. Today I am answering the question of whether there was actually a high-level game that ended without a single capture. Spoiler alert, yes. And it's probably not the game you're thinking of. Well, technically, you could argue that the infamous game that took place last year between Niemann and Carlsen, and it went like d4, knight f6, c4, resigns. Carlsen obviously lost, resigned, does fit the profile. But this is too easy, right? Obviously, this is a game at a high level that ended with no captures, but we want to go one step deeper. One step deeper? Does anyone say that? No. On this channel, we only do quality stuff. We wanted to find a game that actually lasted for quite some moves and made total sense and was not controversial. Funnily enough, this game also features our dear friend Hans Niemann, also playing white, also starting with d4, knight f6, and c4. Coincidence? Well, yeah, it's a coincidence. The game in question and the game we're looking at today is actually very interesting, but you would expect that, being it the game that finished with no captures, and it's not 2 moves, it's 22. Sorry if you're British. Now, this game is obviously played by Hans Niemann and the French Grandmaster, I'm probably about to butcher the name, even though I did prepare, Sébastien Marseille. There you go, that's the best I can do. The game was played in 2020, back when life was so simple. We only had the global pandemic to care about. Now we have a war in the center of Europe, but never mind all that. It was 2 years before that infamous game and 3 years ago. It was played a couple days before Christmas, funnily enough, in Spain. And yeah, in the opening, the game was actually quite normal. You know, like I said, d4, knight f6, c4, normal stuff, unless you're Carlsen. And then we have e6, very, very typical. Knight c3, bishop b4. The Nimzo Indian defense, one of the best ways to play against d4 as black. And if you are a d4 player as white, you must have seen it many times already. Then we get, again, the very normal e3, castles, bishop d3. These are the main moves with very popular and simple plans. White does not look for a very open game, doesn't look to be very ambitious, just wants to occupy more space than black whilst keeping a semi-closed position to outplay black positionally. And now it's the time for black to bring the first interesting idea, to say the least. The one that makes the position slightly unorthodox, the one that probably, caught Niemann off guard, and the one that I would be surprised by myself, to be honest. b6. b6 is obviously looking to do rook b8, rook b7. Now, it obviously wants to fianchetto the bishop, not like that, arrows my, but bishop b7 is obviously what Marseille is looking to do. Also, guys, if you're enjoying this video, please like the hell out of it, subscribe to the channel, and you can also support me with your money. The link is in the description. Do it for the terrible jokes, for the drunk arrows, whatever. Anyway, so why is b6 and bishop b7 such an unorthodox idea? Very simply, actually. In an Nimzo Indian, black is usually looking to strike, or should I say counter-strike, white in the center immediately. So we're looking to play either c5 or d5, like right now, instead of b6. c5 and d5 are the 2 most popular replies. b6 is not even in the top 5. That's why it's so surprising. That's why it was played, I assume. And it's a very Piet's modern Alekhine defense type of idea. We're looking to give the center to white. We're looking to concede equality. Yes, our position is going to be worse, and we know that. But we are counting on white to overextend his center and look to strike that center from the flank. But this approach is very functional. That's why, people play it. People play the Pirzas and modern and stuff like that. But it's very risky. So Niemann plays knight g to e2, bishop b7, the most predictable move ever, and now a3, also very typical for the Nimzo Indian setups, asking the bishop on before the ultimate question, are you going to take that knight or are you not going to take that knight? And knowing the nature of the video you're watching right now, it's a no capture game. Obviously, the bishop did not do that. And here, I think the first problem for Maze started. In a lot of Nimzo Indian setups, after a3, actually the bishop wants to take that knight and does take the knight on c3. And it happens because the knight on c3 acts as a very, very good defender / supporter of white's center. In the future, or even right now, the knight on c3 is otherwise, if not taken, is controlling or helping control d5 and e4. Really, really key squares in the center, all right? And that's why black usually just takes it. I know it's conceding a bishop pair, but it has an upside. It relinquishes a little bit white's control over the center. But because Niemann played knight e2, probably with a view to recapture with the knight, like so, right? Maze probably figured, I mean, why would I want to concede the bishop pair and still have knight on c3? So he did not capture that knight. He retreated with bishop to e7. And the position from equal got to white is slightly better, actually. Maybe sometimes you could say even just straight out better. But I hear you say, what about taking that knight to force taking back and now take on g7? And I'm like, my friend, your rating is probably not very high, or you're not paying attention. Because after rook g1 attacking that bishop, bishop has to retreat, otherwise we're going to lose it. And then I'm not really, okay, so let's retreat it, I'm back to b7. And then I'm not really fancying this black king side, you know. Actually, if the engine is run for long enough, the engine is going to give you some interesting numbers. The engine is telling me, at least right now, that white is at least +2. So very, very risky to do that. That's why it didn't happen, right? So we've got bishop to e7 instead. And because of that bishop to e7, I think long-term black is going to suffer, because white, with the help of both knights, is going to really make their center strong, continuing with e4, d6 castles, c5, and now we don't capture d5. And you know, this is very strong. White has got more space. Yes, there is nothing quantifiable right now, but it's apparent that white has got at least an edge in this position. It's more comfortable to play with white. White's got more space. You could argue maybe even slightly more development. And again, we're asking ourselves a question. Does black take the pawn on d5? And this is where I'm going to say, hey, again, this is a no capture game. So instead, e5 happened. Intentionally just locking the center down. And black just wants to believe that at some point black gets to undermine the center, the central structure from the flank with something like b5 or f5, and going to make this bishop work. This bishop is not looking very good right now, but has immense potential. And it's all about whether black will have enough time to make it good. And now we have knight g3, knight e8, looking very awkward, but is actually the best move. And I agree, it's not like I'm looking clever by agreeing with this, but if you are a beginner to intermediate player, or even like close to advanced, these kinds of retreats are the ones that you want to keep in mind. Just memorize this. Knight from f6 to a square like e8. It looks awkward, but in a lots of positions, when you have less space and you've got a center lockdown, makes a lot of sense, because we want to play exactly what I told you. We want to play f5. We want to try and get the center broken down. Niemann does not allow that, quite naturally, plays knight f5. And this is another great idea for you all to memorize. Now, some of you are, e4 players, very active players, very direct, and you always play like e4, knight f3, bishop c4, castles, and you go for it. And some of you may not be able to grasp sometimes why people are playing, instead of knight f3, knight e2 instead. Like, why would you not develop it closer to the center? And the answer to that question is actually very simple. In some positions, you are actually better off playing a maneuver that is more nuanced, more complicated than your typical direct knight f3, knight e5 thing. You want to play knight e2, knight g3, and knight f5. On f5, the knight is also brilliant. In some cases, is even better than the one on e5. So also an idea to keep in mind. The knight is attacking that bishop. I'm not sure if the bishop stays on e7, whether the knight wants to capture that bishop. Probably not. The knight on f5 plays a very important role of not allowing f5 for black, and now bishop f6, trying to avoid the captures at all costs. It almost seems like Marseille was looking into the future and saw me making the video about this game in 3 years' time, and he was like, yes, I want this game to be memorized as the one with no capture, so everyone will talk about it. Maybe it was just in a feisty mood. I don't know. So the next move that Niemann played is g3. And again, it is the best move. You're like, g3, what the hell? It's actually, again, quite self-explanatory. When you have more space, and in this case, Niemann clearly does, you want to make something happen. You want to make something happen sometimes as quickly as possible before the opponent gets to untangle. Because if we look at these pieces, well, they're not very helpful to what's happening on the king side. So Niemann decided to attack on the king side. g3, later supported by h4, sounds like a funny little idea. You would like to play h4 immediately, but you can't. Without the support, it will be a blunder. The pawn will be hanging. With g3, though, it's not going to be. We've got bishop c8. Actually, idea that I do not hate at all. Marseille recognized the threat of like all of this happening and decides that this bishop's probably not going to be good at this point on this diagonal anytime soon. So we want to make it more relevant to what's happening over here. h4. And now, again, some of you might think, well, did he capture that knight? I don't know. I'm not sure this is the worst possible idea, but whether you capture that knight or not, let's say takes. This is also scary. Look at this. This is an ideal pawn storm, and I don't think black survives this either way. So I don't blame Marseille for not capturing that knight, although on f5 the knight is strong. He found another way of dealing with that pesky knight, kind of, I guess, with g6. He wanted to get that knight away from f5 because on f5 it's incredibly strong. However, the problem with g6 is that from f5 the knight gets onto even more annoying square that I guess you all can see. h6, knight h6 check. Yeah, this is getting rather unpalatable, right? We now see king h8. Obviously, the king was in check, had to move somewhere. And now we see a very elegant, very nice, very simple king g2. Another idea for you people in the bank. Once you moved your pawns like this, in some kind of configuration that is similar to this one, and you know that you've got pieces around your king, so it's not going to be exposed, you can always play king g2, and you can maybe try and move your rook there and try to create a mating attack. Especially you can do king g2 when you see that this diagonal is just blocked off, and in this position it obviously is. So another one to remember. And now bishop g7. Bishop g7. Oh boy, this bishop required an adventure to move 3 times to only move 1 square in the end. But of course, because of how really difficult that knight is to handle, maybe at some point we want to capture it, although capturing it will also bring all kinds of trouble. Very weak dark squares. And you may say, does black even have any good moves at this point? And I'm like, I don't know really, because the position is already winning for white. It's +2 pretty much, and the game is not far from being finished, to be honest. H5, we've got some pawn tension right there. Captures? Nah, it's a no capture game. G5, trying to keep the position as compact as possible. And again, it looks like this move is quite sensible. We don't want to disrupt the kingside too much. We want to block everything off as much as we can. And by extension, we are now attacking this knight straight away. It's not defended anymore, and this pawn is defended by the queen, if you haven't noticed. Since the knight is attacked, wants to retreat, knight g4. Very, very simple. We've got queen d7 now, trying to develop the queen a little bit, trying to attack the knight, yes, undefends the pawn, but creates a more strong, good English, a stronger counter threat by attacking that knight. F3, never play F3 except when it's good, and here it's really good. Pushing a pawn forward on the side you want to attack. The king is going to be safe either way. We protect the knight some more. Looks pretty fine to me. Pretty fine to me. The queen ain't going to capture that knight now. We're still attacking that pawn, by the way. Not anymore. Not anymore. H6 protects that pawn. And again, the position is really, really blocked. White's got more space. White's definitely enjoying lots of advantage, winning, etc., etc. I look at the engine, it's still showing +2. It's just a great position. Rook H1 now by Niemann. Again, like I said, King G2, Rook H1, a very, very, very normal, natural development of the position. A6. A6 is the move I don't understand. I'll be perfectly honest. Well, I do understand it. It's just that I understand the idea, the execution is all wrong. And actually, because of that, the game is going to be lost in just 2 moves. And you'll see why. So A6, in my opinion, the intention is, like I also said some minutes ago, we want to, from Black's perspective, tear the center open. We want to play B5 or F5. We want to try and, give ourselves some breathing space, right? But the problem is A6 creates a weakness, a massive weakness, that is the B6 square. And, this knight gets to B6, forks, not great, not great. And this is exactly, I don't know why, the player that is of 25, 50 levels should not be able to just miss those kinds of weaknesses. But at the same time, when you've got so many threats, keep in mind when your position is so blocked, you can kind of understand that. Now we see knight e3, also very, very sensible move. The knight is probably looking to go back to f5 if it is allowed to do that. We see knight c7, again, probably looking to support this b5 push. And the last couple of moves have been to make that push possible, but a very simple move, after which the game ends immediately because Maze resigns, knight a4. And why did he resign? Well, if that was an online blitz game or a rapid game for you people, you would never resign, like whatever. But on a grandmaster level, this is understandably resignable. Even though there was no captures, you see? I didn't lie to you. Nothing was captured, ever. All the pieces, all the pawns, all the kings, are left on the board. And the position is resignable simply because how are you going to stop knight takes b6? And how are you going to stop, all the threats? Okay, you can stop the knight from forking rook and queen by moving your queen away somewhere, or moving your rook away somewhere, but this pawn still falls, no matter what. This pawn is indefensible. And you can play b5, sure, but then that b6 definitely comes up with a fork. So, yeah. And on the grandmaster level, this is very, very much resignable. Regardless of what happens next, you either lose a pawn or you get a fork in your face. The position is untenable. It has been really, really bad up until this point already because just no space. We've got king on g2, very safe. We've got rook h1. We've got just lots of opportunities there in the king side. And yeah, this is not looking great. However, again, if it's you in black's shoes have this position, then don't resign. Never resign. Even the opponent has 9 queens. Never resign, because you never know. Might stalemate you, might disconnect, might, I don't know, just have the laptop explode, something. So never resign. But yeah, in this position, you could understand why. Overall, I think a very interesting game. A game that ended with no captures, ended without much drama, unlike some other Niemann games, and very instructive in the end. Lots of interesting ideas that you might want to have memorized. When playing an IMSO Indian, you kind of do want to capture that knight on c3, regardless of whether knight e2 was played to replace it, otherwise you may find yourself in trouble. You might want to remember the idea of knight e2, knight g3, knight f5 as well, like so. You might want to also remember the idea of knight e8 to enable f5. It wasn't played in this game, but still doesn't mean it's a bad idea in general. And also the idea of g3, h4, and king g2, a good one to remember. And lots of other stuff. So yes, if you enjoyed the game, if you just so happens to find this video useful, again, please like and subscribe. Just follow my streams as well. I stream 3 times a week on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Join our Discord, support the channel, link is in the description, all that good stuff. And I'm going to talk to you very soon, my favorite unintentional gambiteers. I love you all. See ya in the next one.